Well, good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining tonight. I'm Karen Hackett, Associate Director of Alumni Engagement here at Montclair State, and it's a pleasure to be with you. So thanks so much for joining, and thanks to our alumni panel tonight. We're looking forward to a great program on the topic of beginning your career. So we have a great program, and you'll learn about what employers are looking for in a candidate so that you could be well prepared as you kick off your own job search. And we'll hear from these three alumni who will share with you their success stories. But before I turn it over to them, I wanted to share some news about our alumni network. As future alumni, you will soon be joining a successful network of fellow Redhawks that is 130,000 strong. And you play an important role in the future success of this network. As alumni, you'll always be part of the Montclair State community. And I encourage you, build your professional network by attending alumni events like tonight's, and enhance your career skills by participating in career building and professional webinars that Montclair State hosts. Participate in programs where you can connect with students, such as serving as a mentor for undergraduate students. You can also speak in a class, and of course, be an ambassador and help recruit new students to Montclair State. So there are many opportunities for future alumni like you to stay connected with alma mater. I also want to note that we recently launched a new online community exclusively for Montclair State alumni, and it's called Montclair Connect. It's like a LinkedIn for Montclair State alumni. So I encourage you to join that platform, activate your profile, and you can connect with fellow alumni and classmates and post discussion. So remember, your connection to Montclair State doesn't end the day you graduate, it lasts a lifetime. So stay connected to the university and with fellow alumni and help build a tradition of success for the next generation of Montclair State grads through a strong and active alumni network. So just some housekeeping before we get started with our panel discussion. We'll reserve the end of the program for any questions that you may have. You may ask a question via the chat. And at this time, let's get started. So I'm pleased to welcome our esteemed panelists, Keisha Chavez. Keisha is a dual graduate of Montclair State, completing a bachelor's degree in psychology in '97 and a master's degree in 2003. She returned to Montclair State in 2007 in the Human Resources Department and remains a very involved Montclair State community member. And she currently holds the role of Assistant Vice President for Learning, Development, and Performance. Welcome, Keisha.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
And we also have Chris Fitzpatrick. Chris graduated from the School of Business at Montclair State in 2004. He was a double major, management and marketing. And throughout his college career, he was a member of numerous student organizations and clubs and was actively involved in the SGA and athletics. He continues his connections and involvement with the university as a highly engaged alumnus. He is campus relationship manager at Crestron currently, and he's had a successful career in talent acquisition and credits his success to his time at Montclair State. Welcome, Chris.
Thanks for having me.
We also have Biz McNabb. Biz graduated from Montclair State with a degree in general humanities in 2001. Since graduating, he's had a successful career in human resources where he focuses on diversity and inclusion and organizational effectiveness. Currently, he is AVP in HR for Global Atlantic Financial Group. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to our panelists. Panelists, if you would take a few minutes and tell us a little bit about your career path. Chris, if you would kick us off.
Sure, happy to. Thank you, Karen. So good evening, everybody. Again, my name is Chris Fitzpatrick, University Relations Manager at Crestron Electronics. I oversee Crestron's University Relations program, anything having to do with campus recruiting. I oversee our internship and co-op program. Like Biz, I also oversee diversity and inclusion at Crestron. That's a passion point that I'm very proud to say was largely instilled in me from my experience at Montclair State. I think a big reason why I enjoy that work so much is because of the experience I had here. I also oversee veteran recruitment and relationships as well. So I have been in talent acquisition for a little over 14 years now. Like many people who end up in talent acquisition, it kind of found me. It's not something that I went out and sought, but it was a skill set match for me. It was something I was passionate about. It drew upon things that I was very excited about. And I took a shot at it in a previous company almost a decade and a half ago, and here I am still doing it. So in the last 14 years, I've been able to help manage and help drive and lead a few different areas of HR, but most of it keeps coming back to relationships with college campuses and hiring and then developing and also converting to full-time interns and top entry-level talent. So it's great to meet everybody. Looking forward to a fantastic event. Thank you for having me.
Great, thanks, Chris. Keisha, you would talk a little bit about your career path.
Sure. Very interesting that we all have sort of a path in HR. So I'm 24 years working at Montclair State University. I have done several different areas or worked in several different areas within human resources. Prior to going into human resources at Montclair State, I worked with an initiative at Montclair regarding our facilities employees, and it was really sort of a train the trainer type of a program. So I volunteered to be a participant in that program, and that's really where I found, a love of helping people in terms of training, in terms of employee status, in terms of performance. So I really found an interest in HR. And so when there was an opening in HR at Montclair, I was previously in a budgeting role. I did transition over to a training position in human resources at Montclair. And since then, which was about 18 years ago, I have, again, moved around in human resources in several different areas, ultimately leading to managing benefits, talent acquisition, talent management, performance management, organizational development and training, learning and development, as well as HRIS, which is Human Resources Information System, which has been transferred to what we call today our Workday system. And I also had played a huge role in leading the implementation for Montclair to move into our Workday system. So I'm very excited to be here with you today to share some knowledge around some human resources areas, as well as, beginning your career.
Great, thank you, Keisha. Biz.
Hello, thanks for having me. So my career path, I was a commuting student that worked full-time, finished my classes at part-time, did my bid in community college for 2 years at Bergen Community, transferred with my associate's degree. And, my thought was at the time I was working at this insurance company. I started there as a temp and converted to full-time. And they had a great benefit, which gave you 80% tuition reimbursement. So my thought was, as long as they're going to help me pay for it, I'm just going to make sure I finish my, degree. So finished through Montclair, graduated. And while at the company, I got involved in a lot of work on the operations side, supporting our financial services business. And while I was in operations, I got to manage people, right? I had 2 teams I was managing in our new business area and bookkeeping. And I really loved the idea of coaching, career coaching, and kind of finding talent and finding out, okay, where do you fit? And I was always happy to promote people, seeing people leave my department and seeing them grow. So I was a great partner with my HR leaders. And eventually when a position opened up in HR, they said, hey, you'd make a great HR business partner because, you're a great partner and you're engaging employees and et cetera. So it was a very, very big career change for me because at the time I was on the business side, managing operations and project managing. But I made the jump, and I've been in HR for 5 years. And what I can tell you is, don't be afraid to make a career change. You just never know where your career is going to end up. But if that opportunity comes and your heart is speaking to you, don't question yourself. Oh, I've never done this before. but I'm nervous, or I didn't have the degree, right? I don't have a degree in HR, right? But I loved being able to impact employees across the company. So I made the jump. And at the time I had to commute to New York. I've always worked in Jersey. And anytime a job opened up in New York, it was like, oh my God, I have to, commute, and mass transit, didn't want that. So this job in HR required me to go to Midtown, right? An hour and a half commute. Again, another big sacrifice. And then because of the New York and Jersey taxes, it was almost like a pay cut, right? Even though it was kind of a promotion for me going to HR. But at the time I remember thinking to myself, you know what, this is what I love to do. Like, even if it's not a huge jump in the compensation, the fact that I'll get an opportunity to do something that I really love helped me, make that move. And always loved it. So if you have any questions in terms of what HR business partners do, I support, various parts of our corporate offices, from finance to risk to legal. More than happy to help or shed some light in that area.
Thank you, Biz. And Biz, have you ever made a mistake along the way, and how did you work through it? Is there anything you can share with the students today?
Yeah, great question. What I've learned being in human resources now, what I wish I knew when I was one of those people, I had my head down, happy worker, never questioned my boss. Every year, review time comes, raise come, smile on my face, didn't want to make trouble. But what I've learned is, I wish I would have kept up on my compensation, right? Just to question, okay, am I getting compensated right? Did I get the right raise? Every 2-3 years, I should have done my homework to say, hey, instead of a 2% raise based on all the things that I've taken on, all the responsibilities that I've gotten, should I really ask for more? And I always viewed asking for more as a troublemaker. But now that I'm on the human resources side, and I see that the employees that ask get it, right? So that was one of the biggest mistakes that I made is throughout my career until I got to HR. I never questioned it. I just trusted that if I did my job and I got a good review, the manager was giving me the most that they can give me, right? So I would say that's one of the things that I learned now is like, yeah, and there's a way to question that, right? You don't have to put your manager in a defensive position, but you simply ask, are you sure? Can you just make sure that I'm being benchmarked appropriately against the market, and just kind of saying, hey, I've taken on these extra things over the year, right? And can you please review with HR and make sure I'm getting reviewed appropriately, right? Just a few questions, will help. So I would say that was one of my big mistakes that I've made in the past.
This is just to continue along that path. Is there a right time to ask for more money? Like, would you advise don't ask in your first year, or don't ask your first 6 months in a new position?
No, great question. Great question. I would say, hopefully you've done a little bit of good negotiating, getting in the door in terms of comp. So once you're in there, give yourself a couple of years to get the rhythm and just to get an idea of the culture. And most importantly, to make sure you have established a sustainable success in your role, right? And once you feel comfortable and once you've demonstrated, and I feel like over at least 12 months to a year and a half, you've demonstrated that. And also, you've taken on a few things on your plate than what your job originally promised, right? So I would say a year and a half, 12 to 16 months. And I think it's fair when that review time comes, when that one-on-one comes, you can approach it appropriately, where the manager actually is impressed and appreciates that you're doing your due diligence, and it shows well on you, right? It shows well on you that you're open to questioning things in the right way. And when they come back to you with an answer, even if it's not an answer that you want, they know that you're thinking about it, right? And they'll be mindful.
Great. Thank you. Keisha, same question. Is there a mistake you've made along the way? And
Sure.
how did you work through it?
Just add to what Biz just mentioned?
Of course.
So in terms of when is the right time, I completely agree. I think in terms of doing your due diligence, when you're looking at doing your research initially for the position, right? one of the main questions, because I think I see it as a courting process, right? They're trying to find out if you're the right fit for that organization, but you want to find out the same thing. So I think it's okay to inquire if you're further along in the process about what that structure looks like, right? What is the process for whether it's promotions or increases, like cost of living increases? Is that something that's instituted at this particular organization on an annual basis, every 2 years, every 6 months? So I think it's a good idea to kind of have some understanding upfront, you know, in terms of what so that you know what to expect when you get there. In terms of a mistake, again, along the same lines, I would say for me was really around trust, right? Having blinding trust that others are going to have my best interest at heart. And so not only when it comes to salary, but just in terms of making the right decision, especially earlier in my career, not really having a lot of knowledge about what I'm looking for, what I'm expecting, you know, trusting that people are guiding you in the right way. I think one of the key things is really do your research, particularly when you have an understanding or an idea about what the area or industry or position, specific position that you're looking for. Understand what that really means in terms of the what are the employers looking for in terms of responsibilities? I have to understand, can I meet those responsibilities, right? What are some of the experiences that I have that relate to that particular job? So really doing your research, not only about the job or the position and responsibilities, but also the company. Understand what the company expectations are. Is this a company that you think you'll be comfortable with? What's the culture, right? To the extent that you can research that, right? On the website, via, you know, talking to maybe some people that know about the company. So kind of get some understanding about the business. I think it's also good to show that you've done that, right? If you get to the point where you're in an interview, that you show some of those things, that you've done your due diligence. But I think for me, again, back to the mistake, is really just thinking that others have my best interest at heart. And it's really about me going in with the most knowledge, you know, on the outset.
Great, thank you. Chris, any mistakes that you've learned from?
Like today? I'm saying in general, like what you made time frame. Well, I'll go back
your favorite,
to
your favorite mistake.
My favorite mistake. So I was thinking about a term that we're all familiar with, right? We've all heard the cliche, ready, willing, and able. Right? I think we're all familiar with that. And as I was thinking through this question a little bit while Biz and Keisha were going over their examples, I thought back to earlier in my career. I want to say this is probably 2 or 3 years into my tenure in HR with a previous employer, where I had this perception that I was in a certain place developmentally and in my career path. And maybe it was a misperception, and it was because I did not take the time or the effort to gain some additional perspectives on that. And so what ended up happening was I had gone to a mentor of mine. He wasn't a direct supervisor, more of a dotted line supervisor. And I think I had expressed some frustration to him about kind of where my situation was at that time. And what I've learned since then, in the last, we'll say 10 years since that conversation happened, is that I was operating almost solely from the willing, right? I was very willing, and I was probably relatively able, but I wasn't ready. And there had to be a conversation, and it was a difficult conversation. I remember I was exhausted by the end of it, where we had a very an important mentoring conversation about, here's where I perceive myself to be. All right, well, here's where you are, or where we perceive you to be, and here's what we'd like to see you take on and tackle. And again, this is probably in my late 20s, so this is still pretty early in my professional career. And it gave me a renewed sense of perspective of, I think a lot of people don't have a problem with the willing. And I think that when you're willing, you're always looking for new ways to be able, right? And to be able means, what skills am I missing? How can I upskill? How can I challenge myself? How can I renew the skill set that I have to be more marketable, more competent, more prepared? And all of that comes together, your technical skills and then your soft skills, right? Your professionalism, your communication, your leadership, all of those things come together. And that's when you find out whether or not you're ready. And at that point, if you really are ready, willing, and able to take that next step, you find this new confidence, right? Baseball players often use the term during really great seasons that it just seemed like the game slowed down for me. Right? I've heard that before, where they get to a point where the game that used to move so fast and make them feel so anxious just seemed to move slower because they were more confident, they were more ready than they were the previous year. And that's kind of where I arrived at that point in my career. And that was a really an important kind of turning point for me professionally, was realizing that. But it also has instilled in me a willingness to go to my mentors, my supervisors, and be more coachable and ask for coaching, right? Not every supervisor is as competent or willing to provide that difficult feedback to you. And so if you feel like you're not getting any feedback on where to get better, that's something that you should demand, right? I had a performance review some time ago, where I kind of hit my stride at a previous company where there was really no suggestion for improvement. It was what everyone would look at as being a very good review. And it kind of frustrated me because the supervisor in question gave me nothing to build on. So I at the end, I said, you have to give me something. You have to give me a bad grade on something. Give me something I can focus on, or you have to give me more responsibility, because what you're telling me is that the job I'm doing has become too easy and I'm going to start stagnating. And that's a terrifying prospect.
Chris, is there anything that prepared you well, like anything you can point to that say, any research or webinars or, online training, anything you did that really helped you in the short term and I guess the long term as well?
Sure. I mean, hey, I'm sure that you all won't object to this, but I'm going to throw it back to Montclair, right? When you were reading my bio before and you talked about being involved in student government and being involved in athletics, a lot of those experiences did prepare me. I needed to experience them professionally as well, because there's definitely a difference between doing them in a classroom setting or a school setting and a professional setting. But I did feel like I was able to rebound from some of those challenges faster and more effectively because I'd experienced some of this while I was at Montclair State, and because I was not somebody who lived solely in the classroom, right? Actually, if you ask people who went to school with me, they swear I lived in the student center. Getting involved in leadership activities and stretching myself a little bit, right, beyond what I thought I was capable of or able to handle. I called upon those challenges and hardships later on in my professional life as well. So there was preparation from Montclair, not necessarily anything I read in the book or a test I took or anything that was purely academic, but in the act of balancing it all and being in extracurricular activities and having these other leadership experiences.
Great. Check. Next question for you. What do you look for in a candidate or when you're bringing someone on, a new hire?
Who's got this one first?
Keisha.
I could take this one. It's similar to what I was just mentioning. I think what's important, and it comes across a lot of times in an interview, it's kind of difficult when I'm looking at paper or reading resumes. When I bring candidates in, I'm really looking for ambition, right? I'm looking for some confidence. I'm looking for you to teach me something, right, as the candidate. Even if it's something I already know or have an understanding about. I want to see that you've done some research about the position. I want to see that you know what's going on in the industry. I want to know that you have confidence in yourself and being able to successfully complete the responsibilities in that are listed or outlined. What I'm really looking for is, so step one, right, is the resume. When you come in, you have to tell me about that resume, right? Why do you feel that the qualities that you have fit with what I'm looking for? I would like you to go specifically, I mean, not line by line, but really look at, I would say, prioritize the high level responsibilities and really try to look at how you can fit into those and give me some examples of why you feel that way. So I'm really looking for somebody that can be authentic, that has a lot of integrity about the work that they have done and can express that successfully in an interview, and somebody who can be reliable. I know that that's a little bit difficult to convey in an interview, but you could speak to that in terms of the projects and the work and the experiences that you have had. That again, you can talk about the success of those particular projects as well. So that's what I look for, specifically for positions that I'm hiring for in my particular area. And when I do council managers, hiring managers, you know, these are some of the things that we kind of speak to, right? You really want to have somebody who really can show you that they can perform those responsibilities based on their experiences that they bring.
Great. Chris, is there any qualification that you look for when you're bringing a new hire on?
Yeah, definitely, Karen. And Keisha listed so many great ones. And Keisha, I'm so happy that you talked about authenticity, integrity. Those aren't just buzz terms. That is 100% legit. That is so important. Really good talent acquisition professionals are able to tell if somebody's being authentic or if they're just telling us what they think we want to hear. I have a lot of these conversations with college students where they ask me, well, how do I answer that question? And the first response I like to give is, well, what's the honest answer to that question? Your best bet is always to go with honesty and just make sure it's professional honesty and frame it properly. So that's one thing. Karen, when I'm creating job postings, right, job descriptions and requisitions, and I do this with about 60 to 70 internships every single year, each one a little bit different from the last, right? So very unique roles. And when I came on board with Crestron Electronics, I split the qualifications into two sections. Technical skills, right? Because I work for a very technical company. We hire a lot of STEM students, a lot of engineers, comp sci, business, data analytics, cybersecurity. So I have the technical skills in one spot, but then I also have the non-technical, what we refer to as the soft skills, in another spot. And technical skills are going to vary from job to job. And those are the boxes you really have to check, right? You have to have some semblance of the technical skills required to do the job. But when it comes to the things I zero in on and I really hone in on, one of the most important to me is a genuine passion for that specific type of work. Why the heck are you here? Why this job? Why us? Why this company? Why this particular discipline? Why this path? Especially if you're applying for a job that maybe doesn't align with your major. And for the students here, let me just tell you this. That's okay. It's okay to pursue opportunities that don't align in a perfect vertical with your major. At least 25% of you in 10 years are going to be in careers that don't exist today. That's how fast the world is changing, how fast technology and business is changing. But when you're applying for a job, I want to know that there's a very authentic, genuine reason for you to have decided to apply for that job. And this goes a little bit to what Keisha talked about with regards to research. You have to go in armed with that answer, ready to say, well, I've learned a lot about your company, and here is where I really felt attracted, where I felt that it aligned with my values, my interests, my professional passion. right? The intellectual stimulation. Some of the best people that we hire at Crestron in these technical roles, the best examples that they give us of how they have done the type of work we'd be looking for them to do have nothing to do with classroom projects or prior jobs. This is the stuff that they tinkered with in their spare time just because they loved it and couldn't get enough of it. We love those stories. So I'll kind of leave this question and pass it over to Biz with, and you can see this yellow. This is Green Bay Packer yellow, right? That's my favorite football team. So I'm going to leave you with a Vince Lombardi quote for this question. If you aren't fired with enthusiasm, you'll be fired with enthusiasm. In any interview, let your enthusiasm show and make sure it's coming from a real place.
Is when you're interviewing candidates, what's a key question that you ask?
Yeah, great question. I think one of my favorites that I love to hear about is basically how people have handled difficult situations. It can be regarding a teammate, a peer, a classmate. It can be a boss, or just a difficult work, right? And it can be, you could have been a front desk at a hotel, right? And you had to deal with a very irate customer, or something went wrong. So no matter what role or what job you've done and how you've dealt with those situations, tells me a lot. And then how you're sharing that with me also tells me how vulnerable, you're willing to be in terms of, hey, this is why it was difficult, right? Maybe I wasn't prepared. Maybe it didn't go as I planned it, but this is how I handle it. So I would say during an interview process, just knowing how they've dealt with, difficult scenarios. So always prepare when you go for an interview. Think about whether it be personal or professional or school, just kind of situations that really challenged you, and fortunately you've dealt with it in a good way. And you talk about that, and it'll tell your interviewee how, a lot about you and how you'll be able to handle difficult situation with them.
Keisha, what's a key question you ask during interviews?
Completely agree. I think the ones I had really were around what Chris and Biz have mentioned already. Really situational questions. Be ready for being given an example. If this happened, what would you do? And Biz is right. He hit the nail right on the head. If there's a conflict between you and an employee, how do you handle that? Or how have you handled that in the past? I think it's really important to come equipped with all different types of scenarios that you have been involved with. Again, whether they have been in the workplace, whether they have been with friends, whether they have been in school. So really try to pinpoint some of those, or come prepared with some of those examples. And again, tie them to the job description. So you really look at that job description. What is this employer expecting really of me? And what types of circumstances can I find myself when I'm looking at this job description? And think about some of the scenarios that you've experienced that you can bring to the table around that. Some of the other questions are really around, again, as I mentioned, relating your previous experience to the job description. Talk about, some of your strengths, some of your weaknesses. And it's okay for you to practice in front of the mirror, right? I think, what Chris and I had mentioned, you definitely want to come with some authenticity and some integrity, but it's okay to practice, right? You still want to be able to speak intelligently about what you're saying. It's okay to write down some bullet points in terms of, some of these questions that we're talking to you about. Also, what about that role that interests you? So those, I think, are sort of the top four. What interests you? Talk a little bit about yourself and how you see yourself in this role, and how you can be successful in it, and what you bring to the table.
Keisha, speaking of strengths and weaknesses, what's the best way to answer that question?
So I feel like this is always a tricky one. Because you don't want to talk yourself out of a position, right? By mentioning all of your faults. But I think you really, again, back to integrity. I have a passion for being truthful, honest, and having, you know, a high sense of integrity when I'm doing anything, right? So you really want to be truthful about your strengths. You know, you don't want to oversell yourself, but you definitely want to point out or highlight those things that you are doing well. And by that, you know, whether it's coworkers, supervisors, friends, people that have told you that, you know what, you're just really good at XYZ, showing up on time. You know, when I give you a project, I have no worries that you're not going to meet the deadline. That's why I give you like these special projects. So you really want to highlight those areas. I think when you talk about your weaknesses, again, I think it's okay to be honest. But what I would be honest about is potentially something that I've done something about, right? So if there is a weakness that I found in myself, you know, I just really have a hard time prioritizing these things, or, you know what, I always find a hard time managing my time on these specific days because I always have this that happens. But what have I done to remediate that or to correct that, right? Like there was a period where I was struggling with time management, and it was because I realized on Thursdays, you know, there was an influx of students that would come into the office. So I did a little bit of altering in terms of how I, you know, scheduled my day on Thursdays, and that's how I dealt with, my weakness and turned it into a strength for myself. So I would focus again on highlighting more strengths, but then looking for those areas that you know in the recent past that you've done something about, so that you can highlight that as well. So you can turn that weakness into a strength.
Karen, can I add something to what Keisha just said?
Absolutely.
Because Keisha did such a great job of really hitting so many major points there. And there's one more thing I want to add. It harkens back to something I mentioned earlier about how people sometimes say what they think that we want to hear, right? Please do not try one of these cop-out responses to tell me about your weaknesses, like, well, I work too hard, right? Don't list a quote unquote weakness that is actually a strength and try and slip it in as a weakness, right? Because first of all, if you do that to me in an interview, you say, well, my weakness is I work too hard. Okay, is that because you don't manage your time well and because you end up having to spend a lot more time on projects than you should? Does that mean that I need to worry about you burning out from a lack of work-life balance in 2 years? You know, because now you're giving me these new concerns, and I'll turn that around, right? So yes, be honest about it. Use weaknesses that you have addressed. I love that Keisha brought up feedback that you've received. Again, this goes back to coachability. Being able to say, you know what, I've received really helpful feedback in the past about blank. And that was so helpful because I think I always thought that I did it, but to know that somebody else was giving me this feedback, now I was really able to spring into action and to address it. Here's what I've done since then. I think that that's a great way of responding to it and of tackling it. But just don't try to make out a weakness as a strength. We know that trick.
Yeah.
So Chris, just to continue, if a hiring manager, let's say you're interviewing and a hiring manager asks you, what's your weakness? What's your strength? What would you say?
My strength is I genuinely care about my relationships. And as a result, I'm good with people. I'm not good. It's the fact that I care about my relationships that makes me good with people. So the strength is I care about my relationships. I am very comfortable in front of a group of people. Karen, you may be aware of the fact that occasionally I like getting in front of groups and speaking. That may have come up. So those are strengths I feel very confident talking about. The weakness I discuss most often when I'm asked that question is I have this Kobe Bryant sort of Mamba mentality that he always used to talk about, where he always wants to take the last shot, right? He has this killer instinct, wants to win at everything he does, hyper competitive, and that's what made him so great. When he lost, you did not want to be around Kobe because he He hated to lose probably more than he loved to win. And I have been told before, I don't fail well all the time, right? If I miss that last shot, man, I can hang on to that one. And I get in my head a little bit. So I've had to really address it's okay not to be perfect at everything, but to really take a look at what can I do to be able to drop that and to be able to move on quicker. Right. And a lot of that, this is an emotional intelligence thing. I've been reading so many books the last 2 years about emotional intelligence. This is self-awareness and then self-control. And then being able to compartmentalize it and say, okay, I've learned from it. Here's what I've learned, and I'm still good, and I'm going to move on from this experience. That's something that has taken some time to get through. So that's the weakness I've locked in on for probably the last 8 years, and I've continued to work on, but it's still part of me.
Thank you for that. Well, I want to allow our audience to ask questions of you. So audience, you can send them in via chat. You can unmute yourself if you like and ask a question of our panelists, and just raise your hand and we can call on you. We'll take a look through here, see if any questions are coming in. And while we wait for those questions to come in, Biz, I'm going to ask you the same question. Strengths, weaknesses, in your opinion, what's the best way to answer?
Yeah, again, as Keisha and Chris said, try and be as genuine as possible. And I know for me, just to give an example, I think a weakness for me that I found when I was managing people is that I tend to avoid confrontation, right? And sometimes that can be, as a leader, that's not a good thing, right? Because you let things slide. If something is done wrong, you roll up your sleeve and do it yourself instead of giving that needed feedback to your teammate and giving that constructive criticism. So I kind of always tend to fall on the avoiding confrontation. So again, I may give examples of how that have been a positive or mostly a negative as a teammate, as a coworker, right? So try and give some examples. And I will just say that I have found that lately, it seems that that's kind of a status quo question. And it's not a guarantee that somebody will ask that when you go on a job interview, right? I feel like some of the people that kind of done the homework, they really want to know you. They want to know you. They're not out to stumble you. They're not out to kind of play gut you. Okay, how can I get to know you more? Tell me about what you did. Because a lot of times when you got in that door, they kind of have a handle on your technicals, right? You got the degree, a bunch of things show up on your resume. They're trying to get to know you. They're not trying to prank you. So just kind of be ready for any questions that they might ask, because each manager has their way of trying to find out who you are, right? And it's not going to be the off the shelf, but what's your strength, weakness questions. It could be whatever way that they use. So just be ready, be genuine, and let them get to know you.
Great, thank you for that, Biz. So we have a question that came in. What if I don't have the experience? If I've been a server and now I want a job in IT, what would be your recommendation? Chris, do you want to take that?
I do. I really, really do. This goes back to what I was talking about before on the on those 2 columns of job skills, right? Is first of all, you will need to take a look at those technical skills that are being required for that IT role, right? And I hire about a dozen IT interns every year, so I do get this from not from time to time. Every year I get this a dozen times. And so you will need to be able to talk about how you've cultivated those skills, classroom project, stuff you've done on your own. Maybe you joined an extracurricular activity. Maybe you were part of Girls Who Code. Maybe you were part of computer science club, what have you. And that's all great stuff and great answers. When it comes to, and I've probably interviewed somewhere in the range of it's going to be between 2,000 and 4,000 people who have held the job title server before. And the best way is to think about all the really critical things that you do in that role, and to be able to transfer that experience into skill sets that an employer will see as being very valuable, right? So I was a server at XYZ restaurant. Let me tell you about my ability to stay cool under fire, to have to handle multiple tasks at once, to have to communicate with other people in a fast-paced environment, knowing that if my communication breaks down, the entire thing can break down, right? These are professional skills that you've developed in that role that apply almost universally, right? I understand what drives a customer. And I know that the job that I do, whether I interact with a customer directly or not, will at some point filter down to the way that we service our customers. Doesn't matter what company it is, right? So that understanding and that empathy for customers, empathy. I mean, there's a huge one, right? So a great server has empathy for the people that they work with, and can really get to understand them to provide that outstanding service. Well, you're going to need to do that with clients. You're going to need to do that with coworkers, with supervisors, in any type of role. So really assess the roles that you've had for what was so unique and what the soft skills were about them, and then think about how you might apply those same skills to this next role. And for the love of God, please don't ever discount or diminish what you've done by saying, well, I was just a blank, right? I have this rule with my interns. I tell them the first rule of interning with me, no matter what company I'm at, is don't ever let me hear you use the phrase, well, I'm just an intern, right? You need to be as confident in yourself as you want others to be in your abilities.
Thank you for that, Chris. One other question. How has networking helped you in your career? Biz, would you like to answer that one?
Sure. I mean, I can't overstate the power of networking, and it doesn't have to be quote unquote, you know, you don't have to go to networking events, right? I think networking comes naturally, just being comfortable, putting yourself out there. And I'll tell you a story. One of the reasons how I got the HR role is I happened to have went to one of my coworkers was leaving our company, right? And I went to a going away little refreshment in the conference room. You know, it was in the city. I work in Jersey. I took a hike, and I said, okay, two things. You know what? I'd love to go there, show my support. You know, I really genuinely cared about this person. And then I've always had this belief. I would, like, you just never know, right? You put yourself you get to know people. You just never know what happens. And to this day, me and my wife will argue. My wife loves to plan everything, right? And I remind her, me and her met in an unplanned situation, an unplanned event, right? So I went to this farewell coffee cake thing, and there's this other HR person. We had a conversation, and he says to me, "Hey, did you know there's a role open?" And I knew the role was open, this HR role, but he gave me another detail, right? It's also at a level XYZ. And that really piqued my interest. I knew that HR role was open. I thought but it was kind of a lateral role, but he gave me that extra information. And he said, oh, by the way, let me introduce you to the hiring manager. She's still here. So he took me around, meet so-and-so. I mean, look at that, all by chance. Now, I'm sure I got the role. There's a lot of things that played a part, right? But totally unplanned. You just never know. You have to kind of be comfortable, be open with people. You know, LinkedIn, a great example. You know, I encourage all of you to LinkedIn, because someone that you know will probably be a good fit for one of the jobs that we have at Global Atlantic. It's a financial service firm. We have, you know, quantitative analysis, marketing, all the functional corporate roles that you can imagine, right? Sure, maybe you have a job already, right? There's a good chance that someone that you know in your circle recently graduated with a degree or is an accountant, right? And they may see it because you're networked to me. So don't ever underestimate that. Karen, that's a great question.
Next question I'm gonna send Keisha's way. So do you recommend changing your resume for every job application?
It depends. That's a very good HR term. And I say that because if you are looking at exploring different careers, right? Then yes, you may want to cater your resume if you're looking specifically for an IT type of a role, right? You want to have your resume read a certain way. You want to highlight those functions and key things that you've done in terms of, the IT roles either that you have had or some of the experience that you have in terms of your training, technical training or school training related to those types of roles. If you're looking for more of an administrator teacher type of a position, right? The resume can read a little bit differently. So yes, I think that there's value in having several templates, if you will, in terms of your resume based on the types of roles that you are applying for and that you're interested in. Now, there's templates by industry, but I would advise the cover letter should be specific to the job that you're applying to. And again, you can start out with a general template that has some basic information about you, but you definitely want to speak to, again, as I think several of us have mentioned earlier, the specific responsibilities listed in each job description. You want to tie in your experience with that. You want to help sell to that hiring manager that you are the perfect person for that job. And so you want to cater that job, that cover letter to that specific job.
Chris, Biz, anything to add there?
Yeah, I'll just follow that up by industry. I remember because I had a operations project management background, and also had later in my career, last 5 years, I was doing HR. So if I was to look for a role, I would definitely have a resume and kind of letter that would kind of speak to that HR focus. And then I could potentially have a resume that highlights and goes into detail about my operations experience as a project manager in the business side. Right. So based on your career paths, there are certain things that, like Keisha said, kind of industry focused.
Great, thank you.
The only thing I'll add to that is if you're going to do that, just make sure you stay very organized, because I've had it happen before where somebody sends me the wrong resume, the wrong cover letter, even sending me a cover letter addressed to a direct competitor. So stay organized and stay on top of that, because the more you do that, the more opportunities there are to send the wrong resume to the wrong place. So if you're going to do that, be very deliberate. And I think it's a good strategy, right? Especially if you're aligning the skills that you have with the skills that are required. But just be very diligent.
Great, thank you. Well, those are all the questions we have. So thanks for sending those in. And I want to thank our panelists for this great discussion. But before we finish up, I do want to turn it over to a classmate of yours, Andrew Rojas, who's joining us for remarks. Andrew.
Hello, everyone. My name is Andrew Rojas, and I'm currently a senior at Montclair State University. In May, I will be graduating with a degree in phys and health and minor in coaching. And I'm taking this opportunity to give back to Montclair State. I'm going to make my senior class donation, or senior class gift donation of $10. I'm excited to give back to the area of Montclair State. That means a lot to me. In honor of everything Montclair State has done for me as a student, I hope you would take this time and join me in making our senior class committee gift donations and wearing our senior class gift tokens with pride at commencement. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Great. Thank you, Andrew. Well, thanks all for joining. Again, thanks to our panelists. This was terrific. We really appreciate you joining us. To our seniors, congratulations on your upcoming graduation. And to all of you, be well. We hope to connect soon. Take care, folks.
Congrats.
Bye, everybody.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.